just as a review, if you were listening last week, you probably got toward the end of that episode going, God, he said he was going to talk about, all kinds of cool speaking opportunities, but he didn't speak a lot on that, because I spent last week really talking about how to build your authority so that when you do speak, then you're going to have a much easier time of it. It's going to be easier for you to find places to speak and people that will allow you to speak to them. And when you do, the stuff that you're saying is going to allow you to generate more followers. So all of those things are really, really important in the process. So this week, though, we're going to focus on just the speaking part. So once you have your content and your authority is really well established, where are some places that I can go and speak that will help me generate new customers and clients? One of the, and by the way, I'm going to list these in kind of the order that you probably want to start. So if you are just starting out as a speaker, start with what I'd say first, right? And work your way down. Don't start with the last one and work your way up, because that's harder. The first one is the easiest, and kind of work your way down as you start to gain skill, as you start to get to be a better and better and better speaker. Then the ones that are further down are going to be a whole lot easier. So the first one is that you want to reach out to social organizations and then offer to be a guest speaker. And by the way, just from my perspective, this is one of the absolute best ways to practice your speech and refine your presentation. It is by delivering it to social groups, things like Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, Lions Club, the JCs, Junior Chamber of Commerce, the Junior League, all of those. Those are all really good places to start, because most of those organizations have weekly meetings. If not weekly, they're probably monthly. And most often when they have these meetings, they ask to have a guest speaker at each meeting. So if you think about it, if a Rotary Club group is going to have a program chair, and that program chair is to get 52 guest speakers, one every week in a year, right? At 52. And so it's a really tough job. And so as a result, when you make yourself available to them, not only will you get that one, but if you do a good job, a lot of times they'll recommend you to other groups as well. Now, when you speak to one of these groups, by the way, you can't sell to them. You have to teach them. You have to inform them. So you can't promote yourself. You can't promote your whatever it is that you're selling. However, you'll be amazed at how often sometimes something that you say will spark an idea within the group or within a few people in the group. I'll give you a great example of this. This is totally unexpected, but my wife is a Rotarian. She's a member of the Rotary Club here in our local city on the outskirts of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And she was elected to office last year. And when Texas began to loosen up the COVID restrictions, the group decided that they wanted to start meeting in person again. They meet at a barbecue place, and it's every Thursday. And since they wanted to go back and meet in person, they were tired of the virtual Zoom meetings. They needed speakers now. They needed folks to kind of come and be a speaker at each one of these meetings. And they had a really, really difficult time getting speakers to attend, especially early on. So in a pinch, my wife asked me to speak to the group. And at the time I had just created a workshop called Tipping Point, which, by the way, I'll link to that on the show notes. So you can take a look at that if you want, the video that I did on YouTube. But it was about how to reduce stress in the midst of a pandemic. There were things that were going on that were creating a tremendous amount of stress for people. And it was really fun. By the way, we had a blast putting this workshop together. And since it was something that was a pretty new topic for me, I mean, I've done stress seminars and things like that in the past, but it's not one of those things that I do all the time. So I was like, oh, we just finished this new topic. You need a speaker. I need a place to practice this. So then I chose that as my topic to kind of speak to the Rotary Club about. So it was a great place to really get to the point where I could really master that content. By the way, the group just absolutely loved the topic. In fact, they spent about 20 minutes asking me questions after I'd finished speaking. Typically it's like, 2 or 3 questions and kind of go. I was there for like 20 minutes. They kept asking me question after question after question, because they were really getting into it, because they had the stuff that I was talking about in the workshop, or in the speech anyway, were things that they had seen in their own businesses. is that they'd see it was the way that people were reacting to things like mask mandates and lockdowns and stuff like that. There was a lot of stuff that was really cool about it. But anyway, so I had a blast. It was great for me as a speaker, gave me a chance to practice, and the club really liked it as well. Well, a week or so later, I get a call from the president of the group. And she, in my presentation, I had quickly mentioned, just as an example, that during COVID, that my team had repurposed a few of our team building activities that we were using when folks had in-person meetings, and we had repurposed those into virtual applications and had a pretty good success with it. And I was using that as an example because in the stress session, when stress really gets put on, there are a couple of different reactions that people have. They either shut down and they try to stick with what was occurring before, and they try to keep doing what they were doing even more, or they adapt, and as a result of that adaptation, they have a better result. So we were showing how, hey, in that situation we adapted, we had a better result. So but anyway, but she heard, hey, I had this virtual thing, right? So at the time, she as the president of the association had just had to cancel their main fundraiser for the year because of COVID. It was like a chili cook-off or something like that they did every year with a silent auction. And since people couldn't meet anymore, she had to cancel it. So she needed a replacement, and she needed something that was virtual as a replacement. And she thought of me. So it was weird because, I mean, that was not something I set out to do. I mean, I was just kind of going there to speak as a help, but it ended up being a nice big piece of business, because once we did that once for their chapter, all of a sudden we had Rotary clubs from all over the state that were calling us to do fundraisers for them and that kind of thing. So it was kind of fun. So, that's a really good way to get practice. The neat thing about the social organizations is that most of the time there are no recordings anywhere. Nobody's recording this. I mean, nowadays they might be doing it virtually, and so there might be a Zoom recording or something like that. But for the most part, it's a place where you can kind of go and practice. And if things don't go as well as what you wanted them to, it's not that big of a deal, because only a handful of people that were in that club actually know who you are, and they may never see you again, right? So it's a low risk way to get practice speaking in front of a group, and get some really good feedback on how well that you're doing. Second thing, this is a little bit higher level, but also has a limited amount of risk involved, is you want to volunteer to be a guest on podcasts where your potential clients are listeners. And by the way, if you haven't noticed it, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I have these organized, the speaking opportunities organized in a specific order. The social clubs, they are a great starting point because your pressure to perform is pretty low. It's not like phenomenal speakers are coming there day in and day out. So the risk is pretty. So if you're just a little bit better than what they're used to, they're going to love you, and it's a great place to practice. And if you just absolutely totally screw up the speech, only a few people will ever see it. So it's not really that big of a deal. Step 2, though, is to make yourself available to be a guest on podcasts, because podcasts, they're great for a couple of reasons. First of all, they reach a much larger audience than the social groups, because if even the really, really, really big social groups, they're going to have a couple hundred people max in a room. But a podcast is most likely going to reach a few thousand people, depending on the popularity of it. It could be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. So you can reach a much bigger audience by doing a podcast, a guest on a podcast episode. And although there is a permanent recording of the podcast episode, the popularity of that specific episode is pretty short-lived. And by the way, this is a fantastic balance for you if you're trying to practice, because if you do a phenomenal job on that podcast interview, you can publicize the heck out of that episode on your social media. But if it wasn't your best moment, if this is still early on, didn't do very well, weeks from now, nobody's ever going to be able to find that episode if they aren't looking for it. Now, there are I mean, like the Fearless Presentations podcast that I've done, I mean, I'm up to like 100 and almost 160 episodes. Even if people really, really, really like the podcast, chances are they're probably not going to go through and listen to all 160 of them. You could, and you'd be an awesome speaker, by the way, if you did that. But most often they're going to scroll through and look for the titles that are most critical and kind of look at those if they're picking up if they're in midstream, right? If they're just joining at this point. Then they may go back 2 or 3 podcasts, but they're not going to go back 20, right? So that is fantastic for you as a speaker, because even though it has the permanency of a recording, it's not like it's going to be popular past the first couple of weeks. So it takes a lot of the pressure off from you. By the way, there are a couple of fantastic ways to get clients by being a podcast guest. Obviously, the most obvious is that the podcast will have hundreds or thousands of people listening, and they are potential clients for you. But however, that benefit is just a small part of the overall power of a podcast interview. You know, one of the things I suggest people do is you want to string together a series of maybe 3, 4, 5 really stellar interviews. So go out and become a guest on 10 of these things. And then out of the 10, pick the top 3, the top 4, the top 5, the ones where you sound awesome. You did a fantastic job. And then you can send links to those recordings to other potential clients, other potential customers. So basically you're now, like, for instance, I often include a line like this in emails that I send out to people, especially people that are looking to do business with my company. I might send a line. In fact, some of you are probably listening. Oh man, he sent that to me like last week, right? I might say something like, hey, by the way, I recently did a podcast on this topic. You can find it at, and then I put a link in there, and I'll put that in my email to a potential customer client. If they click that link and listen to it, they now hear me being interviewed by another expert that is saying that Doug Stannard is the expert on this topic. So it builds up my credibility and makes it a little bit easier for the trust level to be higher with that person, because it's not just me saying that I'm great. Now, there are other people that agree with me that I am great, right? So those are some really important things to kind of keep in mind about being guest on podcasts. Now, just as an FYI, this works a little bit easier if you have your own podcast, by the way. So that phrase, oh, by the way, I just did a podcast about this. If you have your own podcast, now all of a sudden it can be a whole lot easier. So and by the way, for those of you that have been listening for a while, you'll know that I didn't really set out to be a professional speaker. This is not something that I have a natural talent at. I've trained myself, or I've been trained anyway, to be a professional speaker. In fact, I was terrified to speak in front of other groups. And along the way, a coach helped me overcome that nervousness. And this training opened up a bunch of doors for me. So when I got that training, all of a sudden my income level increased, my opportunities increased. And since it worked so well for me, I went back to the woman who taught me how to do it. And I asked if she would teach me how to help other people. I wanted to give back, right? And after spending just a few, actually, I was just with her about a year or so. My confidence was so high, because at that point I thought I knew everything about public speaking. I now had this professional coach, this person that spoke for a living. She was telling me everything she knew about public speaking. And after spending a year with her and her coaching me, I just knew that, man, I knew everything in the world that there was to know about public speaking, right? Then I transferred to a bigger office for the same company in Dallas. So I was working in West Texas, much smaller organization, much smaller part. It was just the 2 of us out there. Went to Dallas, and that Dallas office had over a dozen instructors, and each one of those instructors had 20 plus years of experience on me. And so when I was like a kid in a candy store. I mean, I was learning everything I could. I was a sponge. These experts, they taught me so much more than what I learned that first year with my single coach, right? And in fact, in my last year at that company, I received 2 awards from the company for superior instruction. And so by the time that I went out on my own to create my own company, I knew for a fact that I knew everything there was to know about public speaking at that time. And my confidence was even higher than what it was when I went to Dallas, right? And then the next year, I started the Leaders Institute. And then those first couple of years working on my own, because I was the only instructor, I taught more classes myself those first couple of years than most of the instructors at the previous company that I worked for did in an entire lifetime. I mean, I was sometimes teaching 2 or 3, 4 classes a week. And they might, an instructor at the other company I was working for might do that in a year max. You know, they certainly weren't teaching 2 or 3 classes a week, right? And so, so when that happened to me, I couldn't believe how naive that I was, thinking that I knew everything about public speaking prior to that experience. However, now I was absolutely positive after doing that for a couple of years of my own that I knew everything there was to know about public speaking. And then I brought on other instructors and began to train them on how to teach. And the same thing happened again. I realized that I didn't know anything and I was learning it as I was going. And the reason I kind of tell you that whole background story there is because I have been in the speaking industry for 20 plus years. That was before that I had been in the speaking industry for 20 years before I started doing the Fearless Presentations podcast. Been doing that for now three years or so. And I would guess that I have learned more about the industry in that 2.5, 3 years or so than what I did in the entire 20 previous years. That is how cool podcasts are. You learn so much more about your industry. It was funny because at each one of those stages in my career, I was thinking, "Ooh, I know it all now." This is one of the first times in my life that I've kind of thought about the industry a little differently, where I'm going, God, I don't know anything yet. And man, I gotta keep learning. I gotta keep learning, because every time I find out something new, I'm doing new research. I'm studying something new. I'm going, man, I never even thought about doing things this way. So it's funny because a lot of times folks that have been in this industry for a while, I used to hear the old timers that would say, man, I've forgotten more about public speaking than you'll ever know, son. Right. And I'm probably to that point right now, but that's one of the things that podcasts help you do. If you start your own podcast, it helps you keep sharp. It helps you keep learning. It helps you keep fresh and new ideas coming in, and it can really help you. So I would encourage you, even if it's just for a short period of time, that you start your own podcast, because you'll become the expert that you want to be in a very, very, very short period of time. The next one, this is another really good way that you can speak and generate new customers and clients, is that you want to become a specialist at what most people call Luncheon Learns. And way back in the day, right? This is where I start to sound like a really old guy, right? I used to volunteer to do Luncheon Learns for potential customers or potential clients. And I remember going to a business park and going from one business to another and talking to the managers, the owners of these organizations, and offering to come in. Hey, I'll come in and do a lunch workshop for you. I'll do it for free. I just want you to see how good I am, and as a way to try to get new business. And by the way, that's a really tough way to find new clients, by the way, but it worked. It worked. I mean, I went into one of these office parks. One of the managers took me, I think it was like the 40th or 50th person that I offered it to, but he took me up on it and he let me come in, and he invited me to his staff's weekly lunch meeting. They had it at lunch every week. And I ended up buying one of those 6-foot Subway sandwiches, and I brought it in with me, and the group liked me so much that they ended up hiring me to do a leadership series for them. And by the way, I did sessions like this for like the Chamber of Commerce here in Fort Worth when I first started out, when I got started. And of course, I mean, as I got busier, as my company grew, I stopped really doing these Luncheon Learns. And the reason why was because I spent a tremendous amount of time finding groups to speak to, and my return on investment was really, really low. I mean, I had to go through 50 people. I had to go through 50 potential customers before one of them took me up on it. And I just got lucky because that one actually hired me later on, right? So I could have done that all for free and, got nothing from it. So it's a low return on investment. And so we kind of stopped doing that. That is until social media and virtual meetings came on the scene. And my whole attitude on this has really changed, especially in the last 12 months or so. Now we get new customers using this technique every single week. We get new customers at my company using this technique every week. And it's very low cost, very low time. And for instance, you can send out an invitation to your entire email list, promoting one of these Luncheon Learns, and then 24 hours later, you can actually hold a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live or a LinkedIn Live session or just a Zoom meeting and send the invitation out. And if your topic is popular and if it solves problems for your list, the people that are on your newsletter list, then people are going to tune in. And by the way, if you've got a podcast, you can spend a couple of weeks promoting the session to your listeners as well, which is why, having that podcast up front can really can help you out. By the way, we do something really similar to this now by offering what we call live demos on our website to our website visitors. So if you go on to fearlesspresentations.com or if you go on to leadersinstitute.com, it's going to, like on Fearless Presentations, we offer a 30-minute coaching session for free. All you have to do is go on to Fearless Presentations, coach, and it's a demo. Basically, it's a coaching session where a real instructor can help somebody reduce public speaking fear in that 30-minute session. And what we're hoping is that it works so well that they end up buying more sessions from us. But that's not always the case, but it does happen more often than not. For the Leaders Institute website, we do a lot of virtual team building activities. And so we say, hey, we'll do a demo for you. Just come set up a meeting, put 2 or 3 people, we'll do a demo. We'll do a 15-minute demo and let you kind of see what it's like. We'll let you experience it, and it'll make it a whole lot easier. Before virtual meetings occurred, we couldn't really do that as much. And so it was more costly to do something like that. But now it works really well. And we get tons of business as a result of it. So we offer the 15-minute or 30-minute sample session for folks that are just coming onto our website. We started out, just so you know, we've kind of grown in this over the last 6 months or so. We started out by scheduling these sessions at noon on Friday. It was a Luncheon Learn. So, you bring your own lunch and we'll teach you how to do it. However, we found it just as easy to allow the potential clients or customers to schedule sessions based on our calendar. So we use Calendly, and folks can kind of come on and schedule a session for themselves. And a lot of times it's one-on-one for the instructor and a potential customer at that time. Works really, really well. We get a ton of business as a result of it. And even if we don't get business, we're providing that service and we're creating goodwill in the marketplace because people are getting that 30 minutes or 15 minutes of quality instruction or quality time with a certified instructor, and it builds up goodwill with the organization. Okay, the last one that we're going to cover is how to use seminars, webinars, or even long videos to build a following. My company is in the seminar business, so this final technique it's pretty easy for us because it's what we do. I mean, it's easy. If we can hold seminars because we're in the seminar business. However, you can use the same technique in just about any industry. For instance, let's say you're a realtor, you could sponsor a seminar about how upgrades to a home can increase the value or the resale value of that house. Or let's say maybe you're a dentist, you might do a seminar on how to whiten teeth. Now, either of these professions can charge a fee for the seminar, $15, $20, $30, something to help you kind of cover your cost. But you can also use it as a promotional tool because you can tell them, hey, let's say you're promoting this to your own patients. You're a dentist and you're promoting to your own patients. You can say, hey, by the way, if you want to come to the teeth whitening seminar, it's going to be $30. But if you bring somebody with you, both of you can come for free because if they bring somebody with them, that's a new potential patient for the dentist, right? So you can kind of do stuff like that if you, as a way to promote it more and make sure you get more people. By the way, I put this one last in the list for a specific reason. It's a fantastic way to get new clients. However, this technique is also fraught with danger and costly mistakes. So you want to be very careful. Less likely in today's world than when I started, but still, you can spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and not get a whole lot of return if you do this too early in your speaking career. For instance, in the first year that I started the Leaders Institute, I mean, I was brand new. Up until this point, I was working with a team of people. Now it was just me. And at the time I was offering a 6-session leadership class, which was awesome, by the way. I mean, people loved it, but it was just really tough for me to find people that were good potential customers. People, a lot of times, if somebody doesn't think of themselves as being a great leader, it's not like they're going to go to Google and type in, oh, maybe I should take a leadership class, right? So I had to go out and do a lot of marketing and a lot of promotion. And one of the things that I knew was that if potential customers could experience at least part of a session or experience one of my sessions, that they would love it. I mean, it's one of those things that once people attend, they go, holy cow, that was awesome, man. I can't wait to get more of this. And that worked really well. I'm giving a free kind of demo session, which again is a lot easier to do now, which is why we do those demo sessions now. But back then, I also knew that a lot of times folks who were coming to my leadership seminar were actually coming because I help people reduce public speaking fear. That's how the Fearless Presentation class got started, because it was an offshoot of the original leadership training that I was doing. And so since I knew those two things, I knew that if people came to a session, they would like it, and that most of the time people were coming for public speaking to reduce public speaking nervousness. I figured, what I'll do is I'm gonna do a free session on how to reduce public speaking fear. And I rented out a 100-person banquet hall at a local hotel. And then I went out for like the next 3 months, and I spoke to every social organization, every business group. I mean, I was in front of dozens and dozens I was speaking to at least 3 to 4, sometimes as many as 6 different groups every single week. And when I would go in and speak to these groups, I didn't promote my company. I didn't promote the class. I didn't promote myself. I just promoted this free public speaking session that I was going to be doing on this specific date at this specific time. And I handed out brochures and all kinds of stuff like that. So I think I printed out maybe 30,000 of these things. So, and I gave them all away. So I gave 30,000 of these brochures away to 30,000 people. And so the big night came. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to see the roaring crowd, and at the appointed time, I think it was like 6:15 or 6:30, something like that. At the appointed start time, I looked at the audience, and there was only one person there. One person. Oh my God. I handed out 30,000 of these things, and only one person showed up. And then, so I waited, because I knew more people would come. And 15 minutes later, it was still just the two of us, me and that nice woman that kind of stuck around, even though it was really embarrassing. The whole idea was really embarrassing. It was really expensive for me, as well as I lost a ton of money doing that. Interestingly, though, 5 years later, I delivered over 300 public speaking classes in a single year. So even though that was a really tough lesson to learn, it wasn't all bad, because I learned from that process, and I improved the idea over time. And so the reason why I'm kind of telling you guys this is that the seminars they're a great way to generate income, and they're a great way to promote yourself and promote your organization. But there are some easier things to try first before you cut your teeth on that one, right? Try that one later. By the way, if you need help implementing any of these ideas, if you're like, man, I want to try to do that seminar there, I want to try to create a podcast or anything like that, then our instruction team is here to help. Just reach out to us. Like for instance, when I tried each one of these ideas myself. And when I did, I was learning through trial and error. So as a result, I made a lot of costly mistakes, and you have the luxury of not having to blaze the trail from the start. You can learn from my mistakes. You can save yourself a bundle of capital and a bundle of time. So if you want any help implementing any of these ideas, just kind of reach out to me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or go to fearlesspresentations.com, fill out a web form, and we'll be happy to help.